Hi, and thanks for hitting the snooze button. I'm Neil Hedley. I was prepared to write off a literal lifelong battle with insomnia as just being a part of the gig when I started more than 30 years of morning television and radio. Well, I dug a little bit deeper and found out that I had a lot more to learn. So, in this series, we're going to help you fix your sleep by figuring out why mine is so horribly broken, and then maybe we can stumble upon some answers together. You are going to love the guest this week. I know it's going to be a fun show when I'm done an interview and then I immediately spend weeks on the internet afterward researching out the things that they talked about because I just can't help but consume more knowledge. So we'll get into that in a second with Dr. Sara Mednick. I'll tell you all about her. But first, a couple of little quick pieces of housekeeping. I need your help. I need you to do something for me, and it's rare I ask for stuff on the show, but I'm asking. So please do me a favor and indulge me. Go to thesnoozebutton.com, and I need you to click at least one of the 3 links that are on that page. One is for a feedback by email section where you can click a link, send us an email. Let us know what you like about the show, what you don't like about the show, what you want more or less of, if there's a guest you would love for us to try and get on the show, if there is a topic that you would like us to consider, any of those kinds of things. Drop us a note, let us know. The address is right there on that page. Or under it, there's a section marked ratings and reviews. You click that link and it will take you to your favorite podcast app where you would be able to leave a review for the show, however many stars you want to give us. I mean, 5 is great, but not everybody thinks it's a 5-star show. But what the rating system allows people to do is if they haven't listened to it before, it lets them determine whether or not this is something they want to invest, as is the case this week, 40 minutes of their life in, and it allows them to make those decisions based on what other people are saying. We'd appreciate that too. Or if you really want to get into supporting the show, there is a 3rd section underneath that says support the show. And that is actual monetary donations to support the show. But like any good crowdfunding program, we've got a bunch of different tiers of support. And it goes everything from, us thanking you on the show for being a part of the show, or to us mentioning your name in the book in an acknowledgement section, or even having your name be part of the credits in the documentary series. What? I didn't tell them about the documentary series yet? Well, the documentary series doesn't happen if more people don't click on the link, though. Anyway, we'll cover that some other time. So for right now, I've got to introduce you to this week's guest, and we're very excited to have her on. Her name is Dr. Sara Mednick. She is a professor of cognitive neuroscience at the University of California, Irvine, and the author of the book Take a Nap, Change Your Life. We get into everything surrounding the world of the nap here, and you're in for some perhaps dissonance, if you will, in terms of some of the attitudes you might have had about naps, whether they're good, whether they're bad, what things help, what things don't, whether naps will interfere with your sleep at night. What the hell is a coffee nap, and is that even worth exploring? All of those things coming up with Dr. Sara Mednick. Sara, I am going to give you the very first same question that everyone who's ever been on the snooze button gets, and it goes like this. How did you sleep last night?
Not bad, I would say. I think I had a glass of wine, and I think that kind of put me sleepy, but then it didn't let me sleep particularly well. So it was like, I would say it was like a 6.
Well, wine is one of those things, right, with people, because there are countless people, if you go to the more interesting corners of the sleep web where people don't necessarily have all the latest information, people will say, oh yeah, I have a couple glasses of wine every night. It helps me fall asleep, without recognizing that it messes with their architecture, right? Yeah.
I mean, there's so many interesting ways that people try to use things to get to sleep, right? And alcohol is one of those that it definitely does increase slow wave sleep. I mean, there's definitely multiple studies that show that it does, and it decreases the time it takes to get to sleep. But it also is addictive, and it's hard to stop, and then so then you continuously kind of need a little bit more. And I think that's a slippery slope. But then, as you say, also, it robs you of REM sleep. And so then you end up waking up and have kind of fragmented sleep throughout the night, even though you've just gotten to sleep easier. So it's not a silver bullet, I'll say, in terms of getting people to sleep better.
Well, and I'll harken back to one of the episodes from season 1, if people want to dig around on the website for a second and look for Laura Boyarskaita from the University of Oslo, where we talked a while back about how if your interest is in kicking in your glymphatic system, REM sleep is very important. So anything that's going to mess with that part of your architecture is important as well. One of the reasons I wanted to drag you onto the show is because of this study that I saw, that when I first posted a link to it on Twitter, I didn't know it was connected to you until I saw that you responded to it. And it's an interesting study about kids and napping. Now, anything that surrounds napping immediately gets my attention. But talk to me about this study and what we've learned from it.
Great. It was a wonderful study to do because I have always had a sleep lab where I actually put people to sleep. That's how we started working with naps. But what was exciting was to work at this population level, epidemiological level, where we got to work with thousands and thousands of people who nap regularly. And in China, that's actually the case. So my colleague, Yuhong Jiang, she has been doing research. She's in the Department of Nursing at UPenn, and she's been doing large epidemiology studies looking, I think at some toxins in the water, I believe, or something like that. But what she found was that in adolescence, and what she found was that, actually the weirdest factor is that everybody was napping. And she thought, I wonder, that's so interesting because what she found, she was recording how much they would nap, and she kept seeing like the naps really do seem to make a difference. And so she knew I worked in naps, and she's like, hey, do you want to take a look at this data with me? And it's an amazing data set because it's like around 4,000 kids and from 4th grade to 6th grade. And it looks at how frequently the kids are napping, and how well they perform in academia, in IQ, in their levels of happiness and grit and kind of aggressivity, how aggressive they are or how depressed and anxious they are. So all the kind of measures that you really would like to really have as a scientist to see, well, what is the effect of sleep on behavior? And here it was. And it's interesting because it was, it's conducted in China, where different from America, and I don't know about Canada, but there's, napping is really not on the top of people's list when they think of people who are, really go-getters or productive. Napping is considered something you do when you just don't feel like working or something like that, right? And it's for the lazy, and it's something that I've been sort of fighting that battle for a long time, saying actually napping is really great for you. So in China, people nap from cradle to the grave. It's a really strong nap positive society. And there's nap time in school all the way through college. And then you're even allowed to nap at work. So it was a great opportunity to then look in this really culturally nap positive society, how is napping helping the kids across all these different measures?
So, okay, there's a lot to unpack there. Let me go back to something you said right out of the very beginning when you were summarizing the paper. When you say that the kids have more grit, I'm assuming that what we mean by grit is they're more resilient and better able to deal with stress?
That's exactly right. Right. And so what we found was that there's all these different measurements that are sort of validated measures of happiness and grit and internalizing behaviors, which is kind of depression and anxiety, sort of negative features turned on yourself, versus outwardly negative, which is more the aggressive kind of negative features that people can develop. And so we looked at all those, but she also looked at how well they perform in school, how they do on on different math and English and Chinese classes. And then also they did some IQ tests, so it's kind of the state measures of how well they're doing cognitively, but also the trait measures of how they're doing cognitively in the IQ tests. And then she saw, well, are they napping 7 days a week? Are they, and so that she napped how many days a week they would nap. And there's kids who are napping 7 days a week. And she mapped how long were the naps from, 30 minutes or less, 60 minutes or less, up to like 120 minutes. I think she went up to 100 minutes or 120 minutes. So, within that kind of, 2 hour range or more. And what she found was really interesting. I guess what we found together was that in the terms of the cognitive performance, the measurements of the trait cognition, which is how, how you are, your IQ, the kind of things that don't change very much with how well you're sleeping night after night. Those things didn't really change with sleep. So however many days a week they napped, they still had the same IQ. It wasn't very much related. But for things like academic performance, where you study for a test, you sleep that night, you take that test, and the sleep really matters with how well you're performing academically, there was really strong evidence that the more the kids were napping, the more frequently they napped and the longer they napped, the better they were doing in school. We saw the same effects with grit, interestingly. Like the more resilient people are, the more tougher they are in terms of life's challenges, the more frequently they were napping and the longer they were napping. We saw the same thing with happiness. And we saw a decrease in all those negative features, such as internalizing behaviors, those kind of depression, anxiety, but also in the aggressive behaviors, the externalizing behaviors. The more they napped, we showed a decrease in those behaviors.
Do we need to approach naps the same way that we approach sleep? And I hope you know what I mean when I ask that question, because when we talk about sleeping at night, when we're going to lie down and hopefully, fingers crossed, get our 7 to 9 hours, there's a whole talk about sleep hygiene that needs to happen and screens and all of these different things. Do we need to approach a nap the same way? So if I have a nap that I know I'm going to take at, say, 12:30, do I need to not be in front of a screen starting at 11 or 11:30? How does that work?
Well, it's a great question, right? So are we prone to the same kind of light interference and noise interference and all sorts of things that we are during the night? And I believe that evolution has taken care of these issues for us, which is that we're actually evolved to be able to sleep in the day with a lot more stimulation than we are at night. So we've done a study where we looked at, we actually put goggles on people that would give them bright light while they're trying to sleep. And we found that there was no differences between nappers with and without the bright light. And I think they were a green light, which is right on the edge of the spectrum of the circadian rhythm, which actually I forgot if they were green or blue. But anyway, it's right within the range of light wavelengths that would be sensitive to the circadian cells in the retina. And it was really interesting to see that, in fact, lighting doesn't really seem to hurt you when you're napping, and that we're able to nap with high levels of stimulation around us. Whereas if that was happening at night and you had somebody wearing bright goggles and shown them light, they would absolutely have trouble sleeping.
So we're wired to nap then?
Indeed, yeah. And it seems that not everybody actually is wired to nap, because there are some people who really hate napping. And those people, we've done multiple studies looking at people who claim to be habitual nappers and people who claim to really hate napping. And it looks as though the people who hate napping just don't really get any benefit from it. And they wake up, they don't show any of the cognitive benefits, and they wake up feeling crappy, and and the reason probably is because they go into this deep, heavy sleep, and the nappers stay in quite light sleep. They can get into deep sleep, but they rapidly come back into lighter sleep, and it allows them to wake up feeling refreshed. Whereas the people who are non-nappers, and if you give them a nap, they wake up really from that deep sleep, and it makes them have a very hard time transitioning to waking, which is bright lights, big city, multitasking and a lot of, demands on them right away. But their brains are basically still in deep sleep. So it makes them pretty irritable.
Does a nap mess with my ability to get nighttime sleep?
Yeah, this is a really important question. And I think it often, there's a kind of a textbook answer, which is yes. And that's actually not true. It's a nuanced, you really need to think about this as a nuanced way, is when you wake up in the morning, you start to increase your need to get back to sleep, and that's called sleep pressure. And what that sleep pressure is your need for something called slow wave sleep. And as you go further and further, closer and closer to your bedtime, your need for slow wave sleep is very, very high. And so if you take a nap close to your bedtime that's longer than 20 minutes, you're going to get into slow wave sleep, and you're going to decrease that ability to get into sleep when you actually want to go to bed. So that's actually true. You can rob yourself of nighttime sleep if you take, say, an hour nap in the late afternoon, or even a 45-minute nap in the late afternoon or early evening. But if you take a nap earlier in the day between, say, 1 and 3 o'clock, and it's a nap that's around, half an hour, actually, any nap around half an hour is not really going to be robbing you of slow wave sleep, because you're only having mostly stage 2 sleep in that nap. So although, if you're being treated for insomnia and they're doing sleep restriction on you and they say don't nap, just listen to the doctor and stick with the program. But for most people who are, just regular, who sleep okay, a 20-minute nap at any time of the day is really not going to interfere with your sleep. And if you nap earlier in the day and you nap for a little bit longer, say 45 minutes, an hour, even an hour and a half, we haven't shown any differences in nighttime sleep.
Are you a proponent of the caffeine nap, where you grab a cup of coffee and then have your nap, knowing that if you're going to wake up a half an hour or 40 minutes later, that's right when the caffeine is getting into your system?
Definitely not.
Really?
I think it's a really bad idea, because caffeine is addictive, and if you start, so when you go to sleep, the point of going to sleep is to wake up feeling refreshed. If you start to have a signal to your body that this is when I wake up, this is when I need caffeine, you will start to need that caffeine and feel the same way people feel when they wake up in the morning after they've had a full night of sleep. This is the time where you actually you should be at your most alert. But because we've trained ourselves to drink caffeine right when we wake up, we feel groggy until we get that caffeine. We do not need caffeine, but we create a need for caffeine. So what you want to do is actually, stop drinking caffeine. You don't need it after a nap. When you wake up, that's, the point of getting that nap was to increase alertness. So you don't need the caffeine. You're actually creating a false grogginess due to a withdrawal symptom, because you're addicted to caffeine, and that's what makes you think you need the caffeine, but you don't need the caffeine. You just need to sleep.
Okay. See, that's going to be one of those that people are going to come back to, and they're going to ask me questions about it, because there's so many people that talk about the benefits of the caffeine nap or the coffee nap. So thank you for clearing that up. Now, I'm conscious of
Those people are
Orthosomnia.
addicted to caffeine. Of course, they're going to tell you that they could stop anytime, right? That's what that's about.
I'm hyper conscious of orthosomnia, and this idea that people become so obsessed with the quality of their sleep and what their Fitbit or whatever it is says that creates its own special brand of insomnia. So when it comes to napping, you talked about how there are people who are wired for naps and there are people who aren't. How do I know whether I'm wired to nap or not? And for example, if I try to take an hour-long nap and I don't feel any benefit from it, how do I know whether that's because I'm a person who's not wired to nap or it's just that I'm not napping, quote unquote, right?
I think that it's okay to just feel like I'm not a napper. I think it's okay to have a bad nap and say, this didn't work for me. I'll try it a few times more, but if I still feel the same way, I'm not a napper. I think that there's a sense of like people are constantly stressing themselves out about doing things incorrectly because there's so many experts that tell you, this is good for you, so you should do this. But really, I mean, I've done so many studies now looking at people who are not nappers. And we even had a training where we had people napping for a month, people who are not nappers, and they never improved their naps. Their naps still had the same sleep architecture. They also never showed any cognitive benefits from it. They never felt better from a nap. So I think that if you have given it a try, and you've given it the old whatever university you're at, Harvard try, and it didn't ever seem to work for you, you're probably not a napper, and you definitely need to take a break. I think that is universally true, is that we cannot continue grinding through the day. I have my early research showed that if you continue to do the same thing all day long, you're going to get worse and worse and worse and worse. And for me, the studies showed that, because we didn't actually look at exercise, but when we put a nap in the middle of the day, people were able to maintain their best performance and even in some cases get better than their best performance. And we tried different other things like trying to bribe them and, with more money or, telling them like they really need to get their performance back down to, up to where it was in the morning. And they never could. And the only thing that could help them was a nap. But the truth is we didn't do exercise. We didn't try, meditation. We didn't try any of the other things that people do that are also ways of taking a break and that are also very, very good for you. Deep breathing, do yoga, any of the things that will take you out of what you were doing and get your autonomic nervous system back up again and decrease your stress levels and all those different things that are so important that are not sleep. So those are also studies that really need to get done, is more studies that compare different ways of taking a break to sleep. And I'm, not surprisingly, for people who've listened to this show before, I'm obsessed now with this idea of figuring out whether or not I'm a napper. So if I'm going to try introducing a nap into my life, what's the feeling that I'm looking for when I wake up that will point to whether I'm a napper or not, a natural napper? Am I going to suddenly wake up from my nap feeling refreshed and ready to go? And if I don't, then I'm not a napper? Or what is it I'm looking for? Yeah. So I think that the only thing that you need to worry about is if you wake up and you feel really crappy, then you're not a napper. If you wake up and feel pretty good, then probably what happened was you got into very light sleep. You may not have really gotten into really deep restorative sleep, and that's fine. But as long as you didn't wake up feeling, bad, those are the people who I would say don't nap. But if you have any kind of positive feeling, and it doesn't have to be amazing, great, because you couldn't train yourself to feel, to sleep better if you're in that napper category. So it's really only people who really, and there really are people who wake up and they feel like crap after a nap. And those are the people who I would say, don't do this. You're not going to get any benefit from it. But for everybody else who's kind of in that, pretty good to like great state, those are people I would say are nappers.
If I'm thinking about napping, do I need, let me think of the right way to word this question. To get the best that I can out of my nap, do I just wake up naturally? Do I set an alarm? What do I do as far as that end of it goes?
It's very much up to the person. So there, I know that everybody always wants to hear the one right thing to do, but I think with sleep, there just isn't that thing. We really are individuals, and we need to respect the fact that some people have different circadian rhythms. Some people have different ways that they've gotten used to sleeping, and that's not going to be the same for everybody else. There's some people who can nap anywhere and wake up by themselves the second they say, I'm going to nap for 15 minutes, and boom, they nap for 15 minutes without an alarm. Other people, for me, what I will do a lot is I will set an alarm, because I'll say, oh my God, I have 20 minutes before this next meeting, and I'm so tired. So I'm just going to set an alarm to wake me up like 2 minutes before the meeting, maybe 5 minutes before the meeting. And I will get into sleep, like serious sleep, and I'll have that alarm, and it'll take me like a few seconds to just really say like, oh my God, okay, now I could have slept a lot longer, but I will feel so much better than if I hadn't taken that nap. So it really depends on what you have to do right when you wake up. Can you be, a little liberal and say like, well, I have within this hour, I'll wake up and it's okay if I'm a little late? Or do you need to be somewhere? Do you have a phone call? Do you have a Zoom call? Do you have whatever it is that needs to happen? That's when setting the alarm is essential, right? So that you make sure you don't oversleep.
Well, so that at least you've got time to change your clothes before you get on that Zoom call.
Like we all do.
Right, exactly. So talk to me about, and you can tell already, I'm fascinated by this whole topic, the stigma of napping, and maybe even in a broader perspective, the stigma of sleep. Because let's invent two fictitious people and compare them to each other with that idea of, I have this call coming up that I have to be on. If we've got Bob over here, who is exhausted, but he's got a 2:00 call coming up, and Bob has 3 more cups of coffee before the meeting starts, and he's ready to go. And well, Bob's a superhero. But over here, we've got Mary, who's got that call coming up, and she's exhausted, and so she takes a nap. The stigma will tell you that, well, Mary's obviously lazy and doesn't know how to manage her time, where Bob's a superhero because he downed a bunch of coffee and powered through it. When do we get to a stage where there is no more stigma surrounding napping and sleep, and people actually will look at sleep as a tool?
It's a great question. I wrote a book called Take a Nap, Change Your Life that was based on my research on napping, and how, clearly the data showed that you can get a full second day within a day. Like, we showed the same level of cognitive improvement from a nap as from a full night of sleep. This is a 90-minute nap that had both slow wave sleep and REM sleep. So, and that book came out, right at the beginning of 2007, right at the end of 2006. And so, and I've been talking to people about how important napping is, and it's funny because people who do podcasts, people who are journalists, they all are nappers, and many people who live in the world of making your schedules on your own, and a lot of these people are super pro napping. And there's a constant question of like, well, when is society going to learn? And I've been asked that question since the book came out, and I feel like there's more and more and more people who are convinced. So I do think the tides have turned, and I've done a bunch of interviews about pandemic lifestyle now, right? Because we've been in the pandemic now for a year, and people are able to, unless they have children who are doing remote school at home, which I do, but they're able to set their own times, to say like, I'm going to exercise when I want, I'm going to eat when I want, I'm going to sleep when I want. And a lot of that includes napping. And so I do think that there is a change that is taking place, but it's slow. the more people understand that the guy who's taking 3 cups of coffee for a meeting in the afternoon, who is then going to be totally, wired, not be cognitively sharp, because he's actually sleep deprived, and then he's not going to be able to sleep that night because he's just tanked himself up with caffeine, and so then he's going to have a a bad day the next day. That guy is not winning, right? That's not, you don't want that guy on your team, because he's not able to think clearly and have a clear head, because he's going to be sleep deprived chronically. Whereas somebody who's taking like a 15-minute nap and wakes up and is totally present and is able to focus naturally, that's the person you want on your team.
Is there a thing that you do prior to a nap that helps you get into that state? Because one of the reasons I got this project going in the first place, I mean, there's a few reasons. One was all the scary studies that were coming out about, lack of slow wave sleep and cognitive decline and Alzheimer's and all those kinds of things. But one of the other things that kind of caught my attention was that thanks to what was later diagnosed as restless leg, was meaning that it took me a good hour and a half, 2 hours to fall asleep sometimes. And so I developed this rather passionate loathing for people who could nap, because great, they're talking about a 15-minute nap or a half an hour nap. Well, it took me an hour to fall asleep, so napping was off the table for me. Is there something you do to get you into that state?
I mean, I'm one of the kind of people who can just fall asleep and wake up without any issues. But so can I ask you, so when you have restless leg, does it also include when you're napping? Do you have it in the daytime as well?
Well, so napping was never an option for me unless I was just so exhausted that I literally had no choice but to lie down. And, sometimes I don't want to refer to it as rigors, because there are people who actually do rigorous things for a living, and I'm not one of them. But the rigors of a morning media schedule, would sometimes leave me exhausted, and I'd have no choice. I'd sit down with the intention of watching TV, and then but now, for whatever reason, it's just gotten, maybe it's because I'm getting older, whatever it is. Before I started medication for the restless leg, Mirapex specifically, napping was just never an option. And I've gotten so used to the idea of just having to power through the day, which is one of the reasons why your research jumped out at me the way it did, because I got so used to having to power through the day. I've never even thought about napping for 20 years. It hasn't even been something that's occurred to me. Right.
Yeah. So, I mean, I would definitely think about it now, because so can I ask you a question just specifically about the restless leg? Because I have a suspicion that that restless leg would be increased at night, and so you wouldn't necessarily have it interfere with your ability to get to naps. But that would be before you were taking the Mirapex, I guess. Did you notice that when you took a nap before Mirapex, that in the day you would have restless leg interfering with your ability to take a nap?
No, because I was never consciously trying to take a nap. I would sit down and I would turn the TV on, and then the next thing you know, I wake up and it's 2.5 hours later.
But interestingly, it didn't interfere with your ability to get to sleep in the daytime, but it did at night when you were trying to get to sleep at night. So even though you were trying to consciously get to sleep at night and you weren't in the day, the fact is that you didn't have interference of restless leg in the day. So I don't know if I'm 100% sure that there's very little research on this, but it could be that napping that there's a circadian rhythm to restless leg, and that it increases during the nighttime, but it doesn't necessarily affect people who are napping during the day. That may or may not be the case, but it's something to investigate. But I would definitely say, as we age, we have a decrease in our circadian rhythm signals. And what that means is that our arousal signals that we should be awake all day long, and then our sleep signals that we should be going to sleep at this time and staying asleep the whole night, they just decrease. And so older adults are more able to nap as we get, people starting in, 35 actually was really when these changes start to happen. So as we get older, we're more able to take naps. So I would definitely say it's a great idea that, if you want a pick-me-up in the middle of the day, powering through is not necessarily going to make you be performing at your best at the end of the day. But if you took, say, a 15-minute nap, you could really have, your best performance lasting throughout the whole day.
So you just inspired and sparked an entirely new episode that I've now got to jump on and start to figure out who I need to talk to about this idea that restless leg might be tied to circadian. I'm inspired. This is why I knew it was going to be a great time talking to you. Sara, thank you for making room for us. And we'll make sure that we link to the book and all of that. I'm curious, have you updated the book since 2007?
I haven't updated it, but I did just do the Audible version of it, the audio version, and I did have to really take out references to cassette tapes. So there was some updating, and that should be coming out any day now. But I haven't updated it because, to be honest, like when I read it, I'm like, yeah, this is pretty much all still true. Like there's nothing that's really changed that much. I could update it, but I'm writing another book that's coming out next year, and it's called The Power of the Downstate. And what it is really looking at not just sleep, but what are all the ways that we need to restore ourselves every day in order, and I call those things the downstate, in order, to replenish our parasympathetic nervous system, our circadian rhythm, sleep, exercise, eating, all the different things that we can do every day to support our restorative processes so we can be as strong and as resilient as we need to be in what I call the upstate, which is our daytime. So look out for that one, and I'm happy to talk to you more about that when that comes out.
Oh yeah. You're coming back when that book comes out, but let me get a preview by asking you this question. Which is your preferred type of meditation?
I have not really gotten too deep into my own meditation. I do slow, deep breathing and HRV biofeedback more, so I will really take that just to get into kind of resonant breathing. But I've never really gotten myself into my own meditation practice. So I'm into the deep breathing stuff, but I haven't actually sort of locked into a specific practice.
Fascinating. Okay. Well, I'm interested to see where we are between now and when the book comes out. I'm hoping we can count on you coming back. Thank you so much for making room for this.
Thank you. It was really fun.
Dr. Sara Mednick there on the Snooze Button podcast. No video. You figured that out probably already for this week, but we do have a YouTube channel. That link is on our website as well at thesnoozebutton.com, along with all kinds of other goodies and information for you as well. Follow us on the socials. We're consistently posting information to the latest in sleep science and links to all of our podcast episodes as well at thesnoozebutton.com. So until we get together next week for another terrific episode, next week features astronaut Nicole Stott, who will answer the question for us: how do you fall asleep the night before you become just the 10th woman in history to walk in space? That coming up next week. Until we get together again, my name's Neil Hedley. Hey, get some sleep, would you?